All right, let's talk about conference realignment, shall we? And what the latest news of this alliance means for the University of Texas and their pursuit of the SEC sooner rather than later. Thanks, of course, for checking out the Orangebloods Texas Football YouTube channel. If you like what you see, smash that thumbs up button on this video and consider giving the channel a subscribe and ring the bell. That way you're always notified when we post new videos. So on Tuesday, the three little pigs, the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Pac-12 came out and announced an alliance. This has been something that was obviously forthcoming, as we had heard about an alliance ramped up over the last few weeks. And when the official announcement was made, we were left as confused as we had been going into the announcement. It's a handshake deal. Scheduling alliance for football won't start until 2035 at the earliest. They're committed to ensuring the principles of the NCAA stay and college football playoff expansion, yada, 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 yada. And yes, I'm using the three little pigs. And of course, that makes the SEC the big bad wolf, though not in a negative way. But the three little pigs seem to be building the foundation of their house on straw, or something else that easily can be huffed and puffed and blown down by the SEC. Because this is a whole bunch of nothing here. This alliance is absolutely, categorically, nothing. It's nothing. As we've discussed in previous episodes, they already have a scheduling alliance with other Power 5 conferences. And why on earth would schools turn that over to a conference when they make more money when they schedule those games themselves? There is one area, though, that this alliance makes sense. And we'll just say, insofar as a voting alliance, making sure to vote against immediate implementation for the college football playoff expansion. If they're unified in anything, that's what it is. And in that way, it's smart to at least create a voting alliance to flex your power against the SEC when it comes to immediate expansion of the playoff. The Big Ten, the ACC, and the Pac-12, the three little pigs, would most certainly like to wait until the contract expires at ESPN and then take this thing to market so that you can get more media partners involved, which would be definitely more money for the playoff, but also create greater equity amongst the other networks to consistently cover and talk about your sport. It's what the NFL does to a T. Now here's where this affects Texas and Oklahoma for the pursuit of the SEC. George Kliavkoff, the commissioner of the Pac-12, just got here, has stated that they are going to make a decision on expansion over the next week. So we could find out very, very soon if the Pac-12 is open doors, is interested in expansion. And if they are open to expansion, what we could see is some of the 8 remaining Big 12 schools jump ship for the Pac-12 because the Pac-12 is looking to expand. But it certainly seems like the Pac-12 is going to decline expansion at this point in time, which will close the door for Texas and Oklahoma on any immediate move to the SEC. As long as the Big 12 exists, Texas and Oklahoma will stay in the Big 12 so that they don't owe tons and tons of money in order to get out of the conference. It certainly doesn't seem to make great business sense to spend a bunch of money in order to make future money down the road when that future money down the road is there anyways. Now, in order to fully give you an idea of what the Pac-12 has in George Kliavkoff as the commissioner, as a relative unknown, now, while I'm not sure that the Pac-12 will expand, I don't, quite frankly, understand why they aren't running to expand. We've heard now ad nauseum, you don't have to tell me, everybody knows, it's been said constantly, perpetually, and it's annoying at this point. No conference is going to add teams, just add teams. Got it. Well, in the absence of Notre Dame, there are teams that would bring value to your television deal. It's not a zero-sum game here. There are programs that would increase the value of your television deal, especially if you're a Pac-12 conference that doesn't exactly have the most lucrative television deal. Here's a recent quote from George Kliavkoff, the commissioner of the Pac-12, to the Las Vegas Review-Journal. Since we have the only Power 5 teams in the Mountain Pacific time zones, when we play a night game, we get paid handsomely for doing that because we're filling a time slot no other Power 5 conference can fill. Our audience is limited compared to a nationally televised game because a lot of the East Coast is already asleep or will be asleep by halftime. It's an actual quote from the actual commissioner of the Pac-12. Yeah, we get paid handsomely for our television rights because, well, we're on when no other college teams are on. Despite the fact that we're on at those times because everybody else is asleep, which is why we get paid a ton of money for our TV rights. Following along, he continues. You also have AP voters and Heisman candidate voters who may not be able to see all of that game. So we're getting paid more for that game. But it costs us a national exposure and perhaps a competitive advantage for getting into the college football playoff. We're going to have to balance all of that, but all media rights negotiation is a balancing act. I don't think you see the balance there, George. You get paid handsomely, even though you don't, for games that nobody watches because everybody's asleep. So is that going to be your pitch to ESPN and Fox when you go to market here in a few years? Pay us a ton of money for a product that nobody watches because everybody's asleep. But we're going to be on competing with nobody else at that same time. Is this where you give us the billions of dollars now? For being honest, it's about as San Franciscan as it gets. Here, pay a bunch of money for something that isn't worth half of what you're paying for it. If that's not Silicon Valley, I don't know what is. Oh, whoops, I forgot. With all due respect. So, by all means, Pac-12, don't expand. Because, of course, you're at a clearly advantageous position, being the only conference with teams in the Mountain and Pacific time zones and getting paid handsomely for games that nobody watches. The big thing to watch out for Texas and Oklahoma and expediting their process of getting to the SEC is expansion. And it seems like we're going to have an answer on that, at least from the Pac-12's perspective, over the next few weeks. But if the Pac-12 makes a decision not to expand, I can't imagine that the Big Ten and the ACC are just going to sit on their hands and wait for something to happen, as opposed to being the aggressor here, because both the Pac-12 and the ACC pale greatly in comparison to the television revenue that the Big Ten and the SEC already have. But here's, to me, where the rubber meets the road on all of this. And that is that the Three Little Pigs and their straw house believes that they are a major differentiator from the big bad wolf of the SEC. They believe they, as highfalutin as they could be, care more about the academic side and the prevailing ethos of the NCAA and amateurism. God, what a noble concept. But I read an interesting article by my buddy Reiner Sabin recently of the Detroit Free Press, and he was reporting on a Michigan analyst named Ryan Osborne, who, he learned, had been working in a coaching capacity directly with the players. He was essentially coaching the defensive ends and was providing them help on technique, different moves, coaching. But we're supposed to be outraged by this because analysts aren't supposed to be doing that. Why? Because NCAA football staffs have to have a finite amount of coaches. I mean, you can't just be hiring as many coaches as you want. That would be creating an unfair advantage for the teams that could hire as many coaches as they want, wouldn't it? And yet it's hard to feel outraged by players receiving extra coaching from an extra coach that's willing to provide that assistance, which is exactly what Greg Sankey was arguing for. Greg Sankey is saying, my programs in the SEC are not equal to Binghamton University. With all due respect to many of these other universities across the country, there is only an illusion of equity here. There is no equity. And so what Greg Sankey is saying is we have to be more proactive to create rules that make sense for us. And certainly part of those rules would be allowing programs to hire as many coaches as they want. Something that, as we're seeing, is already happening at Michigan and Nebraska and Arizona State and Pac-12 and Big Ten and ACC schools across the board. There is not a Power 5 school in America that wouldn't be able to hire as many coaches as they want. It's an unfair advantage amongst the Power 5. So it doesn't seem like this alliance differs in their beliefs of how the future of the NCAA should look. So much so from Greg Sankey in the SEC. Now, does it? Thanks for checking out the video. Make sure to give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed what you saw, and consider hitting the subscribe button, ring the bell. That way you're always notified when we post new videos.